Alright, now it should be working properly. Let me just check the audio since I have problems every time. Seems to be working. Excellent. Most excellent. Although I do believe I have that symbol, so I'm going to drag myself over there. Alright, good evening everybody. Hopefully you're having a good week. I have been doing fieldwork a lot lately. Nothing new. Lots of digging. Lots of shovel test probes lately. Fun stuff. Welcome back to another stream about recent news, and I'm glad anybody who is able to make it is able to make it. Hopefully we'll see a couple people come in. Yeah, if not, it should load. I'm actually on YouTube this time. Last week I had to be on Twitch because not nobody, because for some reason YouTube like suddenly made it where I had to reapply to be able to do live streams. No clue why. But it decided to do that. So I had to reapply. It takes a couple days, and so I didn't realize that until the like 20 minutes before I'm supposed to be live, so I had to go on Twitch instead. Sorry about that. Sorry. I know, probably a little confusing. I do stream occasionally on Twitch, but it's really just for game stuff. I'll do that Ancestors, A Humankind Odyssey, and then I'll do like Apex on occasion, some other ones. It's just really for fun, not really anything archaeological about it. Yeah, so follow me on Twitter. I do follow a lot of archaeologists there. Bones of Amber, same as this. And then I have my Discord as well that we keep on. I post all of the links for the articles that I go over during stream. I share things randomly. We all talk about different things. I might do movie nights, documentaries, and such, so go ahead and follow. It should be in the description. Let me double check that to make sure it is. Bum 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 ba da bum. Yes, it is. The link to the Discord is in the description, along with Twitter and a Patreon link, which I actually haven't been to in a while. It's never been used. Nobody I don't really use it too often, but I do have a Patreon. I should probably go see what's going on with it. Yeah, so nothing's really monetized for this channel. That's why I don't really go on the Patreon. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. My first thing I wanted to share was this Twitter post from the Antiquity Journal. Apparently, chocolate has a day. Hashtag chocolate day. The Maya would make chocolate drinks in spouted jars, blowing air through the spout to make them froth. And apparently this is an example of that Mayan mug, basically. I guess this is like a straw built in. And I just love the idea that they blew into it to make it froth. Because I remember doing that as a kid, constantly just trying to make your drink bubble, especially milk. It was fun. Yeah, so very decorative mug. Very decorative. It's beautiful. The amount of detail in there. Let's see. What's this? Composition, one of the spouts. Produced during the first millennium BC. Hold on, my AC is going and I don't want to have it being picked up. Turning that off. I guess it's my heater, it's not my AC, but yes, it is loud nonetheless. Okay, I'm back. So, analysis of the composition of one of the spouts produced during the first millennium BC at Cajalpech in Belize revealed such ceramics were exported along complex trade routes reaching as far as Guatemala. Nice. All right, moving on. What do we got? From the Met Press, Bipedalism and Other Tales of Evolutionary Oddities. From the nucleus of each cell to the architecture of our organs, the human body bears the traces and wounds of a long and contrasting evolutionary history. You will be hard-pressed to find an animal that has no rudimentary or useless traits. Atrophied eyes, discarded wings, or male breasts, to name just a few of many. These are all signs of history, legacies of distant relatives, disused structures that evolution will tolerate for a while or will reuse at a later date should they be needed, as in the case of the eyes that can be found below the skin of some moles or penguin wings used as fins, or insect wings that are repurposed as halters. From the nucleus of each cell to the architecture of our organs, the human body, too, bears the traces and wounds of a long and contrasting evolutionary history. Naturally, not everything in our bodies serves as a purpose. Otherwise, we would have to ask ourselves why we, and not the Neanderthals, have chins. To look for a function at all costs would be ridiculous. Indeed, despite the beautiful proportions of Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, inscribed within a circle and square, our physique is mainly a compendium of mismatches worthy of Homer Simpson. In males, for example, what is the point of the urethra passing through the center of the prostate, whose function is in no way linked to urination? The result is that when the latter becomes inflamed and enlarged over the years, there is a lot of unnecessary pain. This makes absolutely no sense other than the fact that until recently, people did not grow old enough to suffer from such an ailment. It makes no sense, but this is evolution. Imperfection in nature arises from the need to find compromises between different needs in antagonistic selective drives. This means that an advantageous trait can evolve and succeed despite the fact that its owners pay the price in the form of annoying side effects. There is no goal in evolution. It branches, it dead ends, it changes. There's all kinds of stuff. It is not a nice laid out plan, and saying something is highly evolved just means it's closer to the current state than previously. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Every creature that is alive and succeeding today is highly evolved. They evolved and changed to the environment that it is right now. That's what I'm trying to say. The appendix is another good case in point. While recent studies suggest it may have some secondary advantages related to the immune system or could act as a reservoir of good bacteria in case of infections, there were numerous potential anatomical solutions that would have been more efficient and less painful than this one. Today, when needed, we can get through an emergency operation, but to have a worm-like appendix in our bellies is decidedly a bad idea. Another such example is the external scrotum. Many mammals have one, including us, and we know that it plays an important role in cooling the testicles for the production of spermatozoa. Nonetheless, many mammals, including elephants, hyraxes, anteaters, dugongs, elephant shrews, and golden moles, have testicles inside their bodies, where they're far less vulnerable. Thus, the external scrotum is useful but not essential. Concealed ovulation is yet another oddity that we have almost uniquely weird sentence. Human males do not perceive the moment when females are ready to conceive. In the more reasonable baboons, mandrills, chimpanzees, and bonobos, the female is estrus. The female in estrus is recognizable due to the appearance, turgidity, and coloration of her genitals, and the emanation of specific odors This means that even the most obtuse male will sooner or later understand when it is time to do his duty. While the human species, this does not happen. For us and a few other species, such as the gray langur of Southeast Asia, ovulation is concealed. This all goes to produce a great sense of insecurity in the males, who do not know if their copulation, which is often obtained at a high price, has been successful or not. The list of evolutionary oddities goes on and on. If you can move your auricula like elephants, it means you have useless but still functioning muscles in your ears. I can do that. I can wiggle my ears a little bit. The caudal vertebrae that are fused together under the pelvis are in fact the remnants of your tail, and the coccyx still serves as a point of attachment for some muscles. Just ask the opinion of anyone who has fallen down the stairs and violently hit the edge of a step. Those who suffer from debilitating back pain will understand the imperfections of human bipedalism, a compendium of locomotor inefficiency that made us human. For a moment, let us consider our strange posture, perhaps the most imperfect of our adaptations. The most imperfect of revolutions, walking. The human spine did not evolve out of thin air. The supple spine of a quadruped or brachiator, the pre existing constraint and evolutionary inertia. Quadruped, four legged walker. Brachiator is someone who kind of, chimp, they kind of are able to move between both, but primarily are within four rather than two. Straightened out, meaning that the weight of the whole body now rests on a single axis and offloads on the two legs. As a result, the spine is curved and the vertebrae are subjected to undue pressure. Nerves and muscles have readjusted themselves as far as possible, but not enough to prevent sciatica, hernias, and flat feet. If, after all that effort made to stand upright on its lower limbs, the biped spends all of its days sitting at a desk or in a car, however, we are actively in search of the pain of imperfection. So, why become bipedal? The question is actually more difficult than it sounds. The upright posture is said to have enabled long distance running and greater flexibility in locomotion. A quadruped will destroy us over 100 yards, but we perform well as cross-country runners. We are actually some of the best long-distance runners. We tend to just tire out our prey rather than trying to outrun them. A quadruped, yep, as bipeds, we can climb if necessary, as well as walk, run, and ford a river. This may well be true, but the fact remains that in the open spaces of the savanna, the other animals are almost all quadrupeds, and so far they have coped quite well. It has also been said that bipedalism offered our ancestors the possibility of showing themselves to predators as a vertical rather than horizontal silhouette, much more visible to the average feline, and of standing above the grass to better spot predators at a distance. And then, of course, an upright posture freed our hands and arms from locomotion, so they could be used to manipulate tools as well as carry food and the young. But did we become bipeds to free our hands, or did our hands become free because we became bipeds? Alas, the numbers do not add up because the first lithic technologies appeared in Africa as far back as 3.3 million years ago, when there were still 700,000 years to go before the arrival of the genus Homo, and as far as we know, only the Australopithecines and Canyanthropus, with their many arboreal traits, are still roaming around Lake Turkana. Why did technologies come first, and then total bipedalism? What is the cause, and what is the consequence? Remembering, of course, that the biped gait costs us all of that expensive imperfections listed above, it must have been worth it right from the start, as otherwise our more arboreal counterparts would have prevailed. Other experts in human evolution maintain that the initial push toward bipedalism was linked to thermoregulation. When species that live in zones bordering between forest and grassland explore open sunny areas with no shade, they have a serious problem regarding the maintenance of body temperature within certain physiological limits, and this applies particularly to the brain. which does not tolerate overheating well. Savanna quadrupeds have developed appropriate countermeasures that are lacking in hominins like us. The solution adopted by our tribe appears to have been the reduction of surface area exposed to the sun to ensure that our body temperatures were kept under control. At the same time, our ancestors may have gradually lost their fur and developed sweat glands. If this is the case, a thermoregulatory adaptation could then have triggered the cascade of advantageous uses that made bipedalism a good strategy despite its costs. It is also likely that, due to these compromises and despite its undoubted merits, bipedalism evolved slowly and timidly over a period of 4 million years, following several failed attempts and unsuccessful experiments. One such example is Ardipithecus, which was a forest biped that walked along branches. For 2/3 of the natural history of hominins, our ancestors, cousins, and relatives rightly preferred a hybrid solution, an arboreal life so they could protect themselves from predators with persistent ancient traits such as curved fingers and long arms, and the prudent bipedal exploration of open glades in search of food. Lucy lived, so what they're saying is they imagine bipedalism came about by Ardipithecus beginning to walk bipedally through trees, so they would hang on and then also grip with their feet and walk, and then also being able to come down from the trees, because at this time the forested area was drastically changing. It was drying out, becoming more savanna, so you'd have a treed area here, another forested area here, and in between open grassland. So if in this small area you're running low on food, you got to get to the other one. And being able to walk upright is actually like more oh like metabolically it's better to walk upright, and you'll be able to get there at a fast and steady pace. Although coming down and going between them, between the forested areas, would also leave you very exposed to predators, especially fast ones like cats. So, yeah, lots of things to take into consideration here. Let's see. This was by far the most intelligent strategy at the time for those that were yet to become brave hunters, but were delicious prey for felines and giant eagles. Today, baboons and other primates do the same. So let us forget the story of human evolution that begins with the heroic descent from the trees to conquer the savannah on foot. Only in the early days of the genus Homo did we become complete bipeds, and many of our companions still curse that day. Walking upright on your legs becomes a big task if your diet changes in the meantime. Your brain starts to grow and you have to give birth. The pelvis cannot expand much because if it did, you would not be able to stand upright. Consequently, the baby's head passes with considerable difficulty. If you could reset and go back, the ideal engineering solution would be to give birth directly from the abdomen. But this is not possible because our birth canal is a modified version of that of reptiles, which lay eggs, and of early mammals, which give birth to tiny offspring via the pelvis. I mean, if you look at any other mammal, the size of the offspring are very, very tiny in comparison to the mothers. I mean, pandas are a real example of this. Kangaroos as well, when they actually give birth, it's very, very tiny, and then it kind of is, if you look at it, it's still kind of in like a fetal state. It's not really that cute of a thing. But that the balance between being able to walk upright and the narrowing of the hips to do that while trying to compensate for the size of a baby's head is very difficult. It is one of the reasons humans have such a difficult time giving birth is our large brains. The baby's head passes with considerable difficulty. If you could reset and go, yep, 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 yep. Where did I go? So compromises are improvised, fixing pregnancy at 9 months and giving birth to helpless babies whose brains are only one-third developed, with the remaining two-thirds being completed later. It remains a truly imperfect solution. However, if we think not only of how many mothers and babies have died during childbirth, but of how painful it is for women at the best of times. The transition to bipedalism generated negative consequences in almost every part of the body. Human feet, with their plantigrade locomotion, have to tolerate high stress levels. Our neck, with that heavy, swinging bowling ball balanced on top, becomes a weak point. The abdomen, with all of its internal organs, is exposed to all sorts of trauma. The peritoneum, in being pushed down by the force of gravity, provoked a predisposition to hernias and prolapses. Um, they're talking about the muscles within the pelvic region. So, a prolapse, you can actually have basically your insides coming to the outside with any of the orifices down in that bathing suit region. And it is actually very common for women to suffer prolapses post birth. This makes them completely inefficient and easily clogged up with mucus as well as with slimy substance. Oh, I skipped. You might even feel the consequences on your face. The next time you have a cold and feel the mucus pressing into every orifice of your face, think about the fact that your constipated maxillary sinuses, the maxilla is the bone right here, so sinuses all in this area, have their drainage channels pointed upwards towards the nasal cavity against gravity. This makes them completely inefficient and easily clogged up with mucus as well as with other slimy substances. This seems like a bad design, but the fact is that in a quadruped, the openings of the maxillary sinuses faces forward, which works well. Yet for former quadrupeds like us, our faces have only recently adapted a vertical position, and this is the result. So, if it were to adapt and become more efficient, what would we look like? Archaeologist Andrei Lorai Goran was right in saying the history of humanity began with good feet, before great brains, but it was an ordeal, particularly in the beginning. Then we grew to like it, and with those legs, we became migrant primates with a strong sense of curiosity and no more boundaries to hold us back. Yeah, the evolution of the feet is so important. If you were to look at a chimp or a bonobo's feet, they're flat especially when they're walking um, upright. So their feet are flat. They don't have the arcs. The arcs are really important to have that spring and to make it functional. So their feet are flat, and then also our femurs. Can't think of the word. Our femurs are actually angled. They're not straight up and down. They're angled, and this helps with walking straight as well. So a chimp's are straight, and when they walk, they actually have to kind of teeter back and forth. Ours makes it more efficient when it's kind of angled in like that. All right. Next, one of Europe's most ancient domestic dogs lived in the Basque country. So we got some bones, humerus, anterior, posterior, medial, lateral view of a humerus. If you don't know what the humerus is, it's the bicep, basically. Not the muscle, it's the bone right here, your arm. The dog is the first species domesticated by humans, although the geographical and temporal origin of wolf domestication remains a matter of debate. In an excavation led by Jesus, hold on, I will be back in a minute. All right, I'm back. Sorry, guys. Uh, anyways, let's continue. Where are we? 1985, an almost complete humerus was recovered from a canid, a family of carnivores that includes wolves, dogs, foxes, and coyotes, among others. At that time, it was difficult to identify which species of canid it belonged to. Now, the Human Evolutionary Biology team at the University of the Basque Country, led by Professor Conchi de la Rua, has carried out an in-depth study of the bone's remains. A morphological, radiometric, and genetic analysis has enabled the species to identify genetically as Canis lupus familiaris. So, morphological, so they looked at the shape of it. Radiometric, just looking at the radiometry of it. Genetic analysis, guess they were able to get some DNA from it, and they identified it as the domesticated dog. The direct dating of the humerus by means of carbon-14 using particle accelerator mass spectrometry spectrometry. I know how to say this word, I swear I do. It gives it an age of 17,410 to 17,096 years before present. Cal is calibrated years. The results obtained are adjusted to take into account changes in the global concentration of radiocarbon over time. So after the Industrial Revolution, the amount of carbon in the air changed. So we've begun calibrating that in order to adjust for it. If you don't, you might get a completely different date. That means that the Araya dog lived in the Magdalenian period of the Upper Paleolithic, which makes it one of the most ancient domestic dogs to have existed so far in Europe. The Araya dog shares the mitochondrial lineage with the few Magdalenian dogs analyzed so far. The origin of this lineage is linked to a period of cold climate coinciding with the last glacial maximum, which occurred in Europe around 22,000 years ago. These results raise the possibility that wolf domestication occurred earlier than proposed until now, at least in Western Europe, where the interaction of Paleolithic hunter-gatherers with wild species such as the wolf may have been boosted in areas of glacial refuge, such as the Franco-Cantabrian. During this period of climate crisis, explained Conchi de la Rua, head of the Human Evolutionary Biology Group. The research was published in Journal of Archaeological Science. Looks like you might be able to get to it. So, yeah. Nice. Nice little humorous. Moving on. History of yesterday. The 1.4 million year old skull of the first European has been found in Spain. The team excavating the area consists of nearly 300 experts from 22 countries and 30 scientific disciplines. Possibly the oldest archaic human fossil found in Europe was discovered on June 30th, 2022 in the Atapuerca Mountains in northern Spain. The find is thought to be related to a 1.2 million year old jawbone fragment found in 2007. Just a few meters away at the same site, which has not yet been classified, it is definitely older than the remains of the Homo ancestor, the pioneer man, which was also found in a nearby cave in Atapuerca in 1997 and is believed to be 850,000 years old. Experts now think that the newly found facial bone, so if you right here, you can see kind of the curve of the dental arc going on. These are for molars attachment. This is a groundbreaking discovery, as the first human species was thought to have appeared in Europe only 45,000 years ago. The discovery of two 1.4 million year old facial bones at the same site means that there are a million more years of evolution in Europe that we know nothing about. Juan Luis Arzuaga, paleontologist and one of three co-directors of the prehistoric site of Atapuerca, said that these fossils could force us to rewrite the books on human evolution because the push back the human presence in Europe and show us that things we thought appeared at the end of evolution, like the modern face, came into being at the beginning. He also stated that the finding of the facial bones was a scientific miracle, as usually only parts of the skull are found, but not the faces of ancient hominids. A lot of thin and delicate bone features in the face. When did modern humans first evolve? There is no clear answer to this question, and scientists are still investigating and linking the existent contradictory information. According to fossils and DNA, modern Homo sapiens evolved in Africa. This should be italicized. About 300 thousand years ago, while the ancestors of today human population outside Africa left the continent only about 60,000 years ago and arrived in Europe about 45,000 years ago, where they quickly replaced the long established population of Neanderthals, which died out about 40,000 years ago. However, archaeological findings, tools, artifacts, cave paintings prove that modern humans who use complex technologies and build diverse cultures, in other words, behavioral modernity, developed only more recently, 50,000 to 65,000 years ago. Because 200,000 to 300,000 years after the first appearance of Homo sapiens, tools and artifacts remain simple, little better than the technology of Neanderthals and simpler than that of modern hunter-gatherers, such as some Native Americans. It was not until about 65,000 to 50,000 years ago that more advanced technology began to develop. This sudden increase in tech abilities is called the Great Leap Forward and explains the development of the modern human brain, but fossils and DNA suggest that human intelligence became modern much earlier. Different dates show different things, and while skulls and genes show the size of the brain, artifacts prove the existence of a culture. This means that it is very possible that the human brain became modern before human culture. When did the modern face come into being? Scientists don't know when the modern face emerged and hope that the new fossil from Atapuerca will help them determine the exact time in human evolution. Homo antecessor, found 25 years ago at the same site and estimated to be 850,000 years old, is the oldest modern face known to mankind to date. Arzuaga explained that it is usually assumed that the older the find, the more robust the bone structure, but in osteology, coarse is actually thick, and a small brain does not necessarily mean that the fossil had thick, robust bones, as this depends on chewing habits. The new human face of Atapuerca can be chronologically dated to the time of Homo erectus, who lived from about 1.9 million years ago to 117,000 years ago. However, the Homo erectus fossils are the least known. Their faces are poorly preserved because they are full of air, while their bones are very fine and easily destroyed, and that is what makes the new find a miracle, considering that this face is graceful and not robust, which could mean that the face of Homo erectus was not necessarily robust, especially because of the European populations have a gentle bone structure. I will have to cover Homo antecessor with you guys at some point. I did cover a couple individual species. I think it was a while ago. I really should do some more of this, and some of the species that have been categorized and some of the names that have been put out there, because where you cut off the distinction of one Homo species to the next is a pretty hot debate in this field. So I should cover that at some point. Moreover, the newly found face is 500,000 years older than the Homo ancestor, leading paleontologists to come up with new theories that could explain the evolutionary gap. For Arswaga, this is further evidence that human evolution is not as linear as previously thought. No, it is not. That nice little line of from a chimp slowly morphing into a modern human did not happen, does not happen. That is not how evolution works. It is multiple paths that people in different areas take, don't even take, it just happens. Like there's no plan here. You get different paths, some die off, some work, some re-merge into another one. So when um, Homo Neanderthal left, they changed, becoming Homo Neanderthal and from another species, and then Homo sapien came out of Africa as well, and then they met up with Neanderthal, and then some seem to have procreated with one another. So that's that for you. A lot of splitting, ending, and remerging to form what we have today of any species, really. All right, moving on. Let's see, what is this? A tweet by Dr. Matt Pope. Winter fieldwork lighting conditions right now, best described as ambient. So I just wanted to show you guys this to kind of give you an idea of what an archaeological site might look like. You got really nice lines going on. I'm not sure what they're doing. I don't know what project this might be. Um, he does not say here, and I'm sure I could probably figure it out from his timeline, but yeah, this is generally what it could look like. The gear, I actually do wear a vest too. It's just kind of a safety concern. It really depends where you're at. If you're in the middle of the city, you might be doing it because there's construction crews around and there might be heavy machinery, or I do it because when I'm walking out in farmer's land or if I'm in the forest, you want people to be able to see. I have been out surveying and come across people shooting. I've been out during like hunting season and you want to make sure that you can be seen. And then I'm not sure why they're doing the hats. It really depends what's going on here, what they're using to excavate, what I don't know what this project is at all. But yes, this is this is archaeology and I just wanted to show it because it's actually a really pretty picture. Next, geometric morphometric analysis of the bony labyrinth of the Cima de los Huesos hominins. So let's go ahead and just read. So they're just looking at the bones at the Cima de los Huesos site. The bony labyrinth contains phylogenetic information that can be used to determine interspecific differences between fossil hominins. The present study conducted a comparative 3D geometric morphometric analysis on the bony labyrinth of the Middle Pleistocene Cima de los Huesos hominins. The findings of this study corroborate previous multivariate analysis of the SH hominin bony labyrinth. So they used computers to analyze the shapes of these bones. And they used different like specific points on the bones to analyze this. So they just, yeah, had a computer to get as specific as possible in the analysis. The analysis of the semicircular canals revealed the SH hominin canal morphologies appear closer to those of Neanderthals than to those of Homo sapiens. This is attributable to a Neanderthal-like ovoid anterior canal and medial-laterally expanded circular posterior canal. However, the SH hominins lack the increased torsion in the anterior canal and the inferior orientation of the lateral canal seen in Neanderthals. Woo! A lot of just orientation jargon going on there. Uh, let's see. Anterior, so the front of the canal, and mediolaterally, so it's kind of the medial lateral uh, posterior canal. So they're saying from the middle to the back, it kind of flares more. A covariance ratio analysis, just uh, a specific type of analysis, found a significant degree of modularity within the bony labyrinth of all three groups, with the SH hominins and Neanderthals displaying the highest modularity. This modular signal in the bony labyrinth may be attributable to different selective pressures related to locomotion and audition. Overall, the results of this study confirm previous suggestions that the semicircular canals in the SH hominins are somewhat derived toward Neanderthals, while their cochlea is largely primitive with the genus Homo. Genus Homo. Let's see. Any pictures? Of course not. Anyways, moving on. The brain of Homo habilis, 3 decades of paleoneurology. Paleoneurology, just looking at the looking at their brain. Paleo, the early stuff. In 1987, Philip Tobias published a comprehensive anatomical analysis of the endocasts. Endocasts are the just a cast of the inside of your brain case. So the brain isn't going to really be preserved very well. It's not going to get fossilized. So really all we have for a lot of species are the inside of it, because the inside of your skull is not smooth with the brain. It's actually got ripples, it's got indentation from the various veins and sinuses, so your brain has to drain a lot, so there's some pretty thick sinuses in there. And by taking a cast of it on the inside, you can kind of get a general idea of what the shape of the brain would have been. Homo habilis, discussing issues dealing with brain size, sulcal patterns, and vascular traces. So just looking at sinus patterns and vein indentation, like I was talking about, he suggested that the neuroanatomy of the species evidenced a clear change toward many cerebral traits associated with our genus, mostly when concerning the morphology of the frontal and parietal cortex, so the front of the brain and then the kind of upper side. After more than 30 years, the fossil record associated with the taxon has not grown that much, but we have much more information on cranial and brain biology. Yeah, our brains are very, like, a big mystery. I mean, we've learned a lot more since 50 years ago, so that's good. And we are using a larger array of digital methods to investigate the paleoneurological variation observed in human genus, brain volume, the size of the frontal lobe, or the gross hemispheric asymmetries are still relevant issues. The large hemisphere, 2 sides of the brain, asymmetry, so it's not like completely symmetrical. But they are considered to be less central than before. More attention is instead being paid to the cortical organization, the relationships with the cranial architecture, and the influence of molecular or ecological factors. Although the field of paleoneurology can currently count on a larger range of tools and principles, there is still a general lack of anatomical information on many endocranial traits. This aspect is probably crucial for the agenda of paleoneurology. More importantly, the whole science is undergoing a delicate change. Because of the growing influence of the social environment, In this sense, the disciplines working with fossils, and in particular with brain evolution, should take particular care to maintain a healthy professional situation, avoiding an excess of speculation and overstatement. That's just a warning to not get too ahead of yourself in what your data may be telling you. So, yeah, a nice little review of the paleoneurology. Yeah, it's just, this was just kind of we have very little knowledge that we can actually extract, and we don't really have, modern neurology isn't really going with the endocast route, because modern neurology, we actually have brains to analyze, which, yeah, makes sense. Next, moving on, the association between skeletal lesions and tuberculosis in a pre-antibiotic South African sample. Reading just the abstract. Objective. This study assessed the sensitivity and specificity of skeletal lesions to accurately diagnose tuberculosis in a pre-antibiotic South African skeletal sample. They had a total of 435 skeletons who died before 1950, taken from the Raymond Dart collection. 176 died of tuberculosis, 109 died of other pulmonary diseases, and 150 died of other causes. So their methods, the presence or absence of 23 skeletal lesions were assessed for differences in frequency between groups. Sensitivities and specificities were calculated and compared to Dangvard, Peterson et al. So they took 23 different lesions assessed, and they also took into how severe they are. Lesions on the central surface of thoracic and lumbar, so thoracic is the middle of the spine, lumbar is lower, were observed significantly more often in TB and pulmonary cases than in other cause of death group, and yielded a 55% probability of a true TB diagnosis. If observed, an association between skeletal lesions and TB was found for rib and vertebral lesions. So they're saying, looking at just skeletal remains, they found lesions, so sores or cysts or something along the thoracic and lumbar, rather than if it wasn't. You're more likely to have these if you had tuberculosis. The results suggest that even when not documented to have died of tuberculosis, TB-related changes are observed in many individuals in South African skeletal sample, indicating that they may have been infected with the disease. The study provides information that can assist paleopathologists in making inferences about the prevalence of TB in past populations. Sample sizes are small, and the inclusion of a pulmonary disease group may have confounded the results. So those are some limitations, some issues that might have come from the data. Sample sizes are small, but they still had 435 individual skeletons to look at. Let's see some pictures, shall we? Oh, I can't zoom in. Okay, so it's got an arrow pointing to some, if you zoom in, there's kind of some roughness going on in the rib. Little nodules. Rib 2, loosely adherent proliferation, thin proliferation on visceral surface of ribs. So you have a little bit and then a thin amount going on there. Let's see. VER, deep cavities on thoracic or lumbar vertebrae. So, oh, and they have quite a bit of overgrowth. Ooh, this poor person. Large cavities on multiple vertebrae, medium rounded cavities, and thoracic and lumbar vertebrae are assessed. So you have very large lesions, and then couple little ones going on in this one. mild bone proliferation, moderate proliferation on the right, on thoracic or lumbar. So mild and moderate going on. You can see how rough the bones are. BOD, bone proliferation, large rounded pits on the body of the ilium near the acetabulum. So the ilium is your hip bones. So if you touch your hips, you feel that bone, the common ones right here in the front, that's the ilium. The acetabulum is the connection with the hip, so with the leg. So they have some proliferation going on near it. You got some pitting, you can see some roughness right there. Let's see. ACE1, small clustered pits, large deep cavities in the acetabulum, so within the joint of where the leg comes into the hip, and you got that joint that will move around very nicely. You're seeing some pits form in there. Deep cavities with borders having woven appearance. Cavities covering more than 50% of the acetabular fossa. So within the acetabulum, there's the acetabular fossa, kind of the a connection point for the bones. So you're gonna have some tendons and stuff going, and you've got some cavities going on in there. See how different these two look. Cavities on the greater trochanter of the femur. The greater trochanter is just a large protrusion. So right here is where it goes into the hip bone. It's the joint that's going to move around very nicely within the hip, and then you have some pitting going on here. Large cavities, clustered pits on the iliac auricular surface. So like I said, the ilium is your hip bones. On it, you have your two hip bones, and in the back they're going to connect to your tailbone, which is kind of triangular in shape. That connection is the auricular surface. It is a joint that doesn't really move too much in comparison to other joints, but it is a joint nonetheless. And there is some pitting, some cavities going on here, which isn't normal. Cavities on the posterior surface of the distal femur. Femur is your thigh bone. So this is like the back of the knee. Small clustered pits, large pits. This is the humerus going on. You can tell by this joint having some pits going on. Medium clustered pits on the condylar area of the distal humerus. So this is right in your elbow. And then medium shallow cavities, large deep cavities on the radial tuberosity of the proximal radius. So you got it going right here, and then a couple smaller ones that are a bit shallow. Large shallow cavities on the olecranon of the proximal ulna. I can read this. So that is your elbow. It's going to be right here, and it hinges, and it's the point. Like, you're going to have that point. That's the cavities showing up. Let's see. Are all represented by these images as they have similar appearance and only vary in location. Small and medium pits and cavities, so I can't really tell. It says it's the anterior, middle, or posterior cranial fossa. Not quite sure where these are. If I could expand that image a bit better. Branching excavations on the surface of the endocranium area pointing at the marginal pitting. Superficial branching excavations on the endocranium. So this is endo, inside, cranium, skull. So looking at the inside of the brain case, and there is pitting and some kind of looks like cracks going on, but I can't zoom in on the image very well, so that sucks. But yeah, those are some examples of those pitting that TB can cause. All right. Behavioral and physiological response to inequity in bonobos. This caught my eye. Um, one, I like bonobos. I like reading about them. Two, it's talking about inequity, which seems to be like word of the year. So I was curious as to what this is talking about. Abstract. Inequity aversion, the effective cognitive and behavioral response to inequitable outcomes, allows individuals to avoid exploitation and therefore stabilizes cooperation. The presence of IA varies across animal species. Okay, so inequity aversion, so they don't want to have unequal um, circumstances, and they try to avoid them, which has stimulated research to investigate factors that might explain this variation and to investigate underlying affective responses among great apes. IA is most often studied in chimpanzees. Here we investigate IA in bonobos, a reputedly tolerant and cooperative species for which few IA studies are available. We describe how bonobos respond to receiving less preferred rewards than a partner in a token exchange task. We show that bonobos respond to receiving less preferred rewards by refusing tokens and rewards and by leaving the experimental area. Oh, so they were trying to treat the individual bonobos differently, giving them different rewards, different value rewards. So one might get um I don't know, what's something of significant value. I don't know. One got a cucumber, another got a banana. Which one are you gonna want more to eat plain? We describe how bonobos respond to receiving less preferred rewards. We show that bonobos respond to receiving less preferred rewards by refusing tokens and rewards and by leaving the experimental area, so they just kind of go off and be like, well, we're not doing this then. Bonobos never refused a trial when receiving preferred rewards, and thus showed no advantageous IA. We also investigate. Wait. We show that bonobos respond to receiving less preferred rewards by refusing tokens and rewards, and by leaving the experimental area. Bonobos never refused a trial when receiving preferred rewards, and thus showed no advantageous IA. We also investigate the variability in the disadvantageous IA response on a dyadic level. Because the level of IA is expected to vary depending on characteristics of the dyad, like in humans and chimpanzees, we show that the tolerance toward inequity was higher in bonobo dyads with more valuable relationships. To study the affective component of IA, we included behavioral and physiological measures of arousal, a displacement behavior, rough self-scratching, and changes in salivary cortisol levels. Both measures of arousal showed large variability, and while analysis on rough self-scratching showed no significant effects, salivary cortisol levels seemed to be lower in subjects that received less than their partner, but higher in subjects that received more than their partner, albeit that both were not significantly different from the equity condition. This suggests that although overcompensated bonobos showed no behavioral response, they might be more aroused. Our data support the cooperation hypothesis on an interspecific and intraspecific level. They show inequity aversion in bonobos, a reputedly cooperative species, and suggest that the variability in IA in bonobos can be explained by their socioecology. Most successful cooperative interactions between mothers and their sons and among closely bonded females. The limited need to monitor the partner's investment within these dyads can result in a higher tolerance towards inequity. We therefore suggest future studies to consider relevant socio-ecological characteristics of the species when designing and analyzing IA studies. They responded to the inequity by refusing tokens and moving away from the experimenter. Overcompensated subjects showed more arousal as measured by salivary cortisol levels. The level inequity aversion decreased with increasing relationship quality. So the more quality of a relationship they had, the more they were okay with the inequity aversion. I think is what they're saying. Not sure. It's a little confusing. I might have to actually read the whole thing. Anyways, moving on. 70,000 years ago. Oh man, we're already there. We're at 6 o'clock. It's time to end. Okay, let me do this one and then I'm going to have to call it quits for the night. 70,000 years ago, Neanderthals prepared elaborate meals. According to a recent study published in the journal Antiquity, prehistoric cooking by Neanderthals and early modern humans was complex, involving several steps, and that the foods used were diverse. These findings were made from plant material discovered at the Shanidar cave in northern Iraq, which is famous for housing the burial of a Neanderthal surrounded by flowers, and the cave in Greece. The Neanderthals lived in Shanidar cave 70,000 years ago, while early modern people lived there 40,000 years ago. The researchers looked at plant remnants from both periods. The burnt food remains from the cave were from 12,000 years ago, during the time that hunter-gatherer Homo sapiens were also living there. The Greek cave had a foodstuff that resembled bread, although it was unclear what it was made of. The earliest direct evidence of plant processing outside of Africa comes from Shanidar cave, where ancient humans pounded and soaked pulses 70,000 years ago. Pulses such beans or lentils, the most frequently recognized ingredient, were frequently blended with wild nuts, peas, vetch, a legume with edible seed pods, and grasses, as well as occasionally wild mustard. Pulses, which have a naturally bitter flavor, were soaked, coarsely mashed, or pounded with stones to remove their husk in order to make the plant more palatable. Well, that's not much, is it? Well, very short. Very, very short. You got nice charring and everything going on here. Ooh, something. This is something you would look for when excavating, is the change in soil. It's very concentrated. Very, clear example. Something was being cooked here. Anyways, that is all I'm able to do today. It's already past 6. I'm gonna try and keep these to about an hour because my throat starts to hurt. And that sucks. And it's dinner time, and I made chili, so I'm really excited for that. Anyways, it was lovely meeting with you guys again. If there is any questions you have, go ahead and leave comments. If you have anything you want to go further into, I know a couple of those articles were a little confusing. So if you want to go into those anymore, let me know. I would be glad to do that. Follow me on Twitter. The link is below. The Discord link is below as well. Also, I have a little bit of an announcement. The show Ancient Apocalypse recently came out on Netflix, and it seems to be going pretty crazy. A lot of people are watching it. It's pretty popular, seeing people mention it on Twitter, and I watched the first episode, and I thought it was interesting enough that I want to try and make a YouTube video about it, discussing the episode, discussing anything that was talked about in the show. I might do just one video on the whole thing. I might do a video on each episode because there was a lot stated. I've only seen one episode. There was a lot stated. There's like two specific sites that were discussed in this that I could probably go more in depth on, and yeah, just kind of discuss Hancock's theories and evidence he puts forth in the show. I figured it might be fun, and with it being so popular, you guys might enjoy this too. So, yeah, I'm going to try and do that. Bear with me. I've never made a video. I really only do live because one, I don't want to have to do the editing for videos, and two, I want to be able to interact with you guys as this goes. But yeah, I think for a show like this, a video could be good. Anyways, you guys have a wonderful evening. Take care.